why we're here. Chunky neck strap, good. USB-C to USB-C cable for data transfer maybe, but most likely just for charging. Power adapter, different countries will most likely have different adapters in the box. Is there 1, 2, the power supply with USB-C, 3, 4 different countries worth of power supply in the box, which is nice. W235 battery, the exact same battery as the XT4. I actually love that they've gone to the same system because I shoot a lot of my weddings with a XT4 and a medium format currently with the 50R, and the two different batteries is a pain in the butt. So the fact that they're sticking to one battery, I wonder how much you get out of this on a medium format. But W235 battery. So what I thought I would do a little bit differently this time is I joined the Fujifilm GFX Facebook page and I put up a post there asking users what they would like to know about the GFX 100S. So for most of this review video, we're just going to be asking questions that haven't already been or couldn't easily be found online. And the first question came about just managing the weight and size of this camera, especially with bigger lenses. So the question was regarding to what's it like walking around when your lens is heavier than your body, because this is a relatively light camera for a medium format camera. I did go for a walk this morning using this camera with the 100-200mm lens, and after maybe half an hour my right hand did start to get a little bit sore. I started to notice that I was feeling the weight of carrying this around. But quite often when that starts to happen, I literally just shift my weight to my lens hand and I start holding the camera like that and then bringing it up to my eye to shoot and then back down. And that little bit of a transition works pretty well for me. And most of the time I shift more of a left-handed grip, suits that weight transition nicely for me. Okay, so the next question I got asked, and easily the most popular one, is what is the autofocus performance like out of the GFX 100S? And for this I've come up with a few tests. So the main camera I'm comparing it to is the GFX 50R, which is my main medium format wedding camera, and I'm going to use the exact same lens on both cameras. I'm going to have to switch them. I'm not going to use the 100-200, and I'm going to focus on a Siemens star, which I'll set up behind me here. I will focus to the minimum focus distance and back to the target. I'll do that 10 times. Then I'll focus to infinity and back to that Siemens star target, and I'll do that 10 times. Then I'll do that all again with most of these lights out in a lower light situation, and then I'll repeat that whole lot with the exact same lens, the exact same settings, the exact same lighting, from the exact same distance with the other camera. I'll use an external recorder to record how long it takes to focus for each of those shots. So the nice thing about Fujifilm and doing this test is down on the bottom left hand side of the screen, I think it is, it comes up with a little symbol saying when the camera is trying to focus and a little green circle when the camera does focus. So we'll take 10, 20, 40, 80 shots. Then I'll look at each one frame by frame from 60 frames per second, record all the times, and we'll see what the time differences are like. This is going to take a while. Okay, that was a drag. I ended up actually making an error, and I didn't notice until I'd shot the whole lot, compiled all the results, and realized I had the aperture off by 2/3 of a stop, so I had to reshoot and reanalyze the whole lot just to get an accurate result. And I got some interesting results from that. In good sunlight, the GFX 100S is 12.5 times % faster at just focusing on a stationary, that target behind me. However, in low light, it is 50% slower than the 50R. This is everything, exactly the same, so incredibly controlled. From 40 photos versus 40 photos, so 80 all up, 12.5% faster in good light, 50% slower in bad light, which is surprising. But there's a very, very big but to this. Of those 160 photos I took, the GFX 100S with the 50mm f3.5 lens only missed focus twice out of 80. From the 80 I took with the GFX 50R, it missed 6 times. So what does that say about it? The GFX 50R is that little bit more likely to fail, and all those fails only happened in low light. In perfect light, they all locked on, both cameras, no worries at all, and the 100S is faster. You can see I am fumbling with words because that was exhausting. Let's go to day 2. of that was shot with one single camera, one 90-minute time-lapse just at a sunset on the side of a hill, and there's actually quite a lot you can unlock from 100 megapixels as well. However, one thing that really improved autofocus performance for me was instead of trying to do AFC, I changed to AFS, and instead of doing a burst, I was just doing single shots with a very, very fine, small single point focus. And this focus was instant. It grabbed it and snapped straight away and was phenomenally impressive. And I'll nearly be tempted to see how that goes with the moving subject, just doing the AFC little burst. I imagine it's still going to just miss, but as far as that reaction time to like a just turning and going snap quickly, the 100S absolutely blew my mind. It is phenomenally fast for a medium format camera. It's just not the sports mega powerhouse we were slightly hoping for, but that's alright, it still kicks ass. Next question, how is the blackout period when shooting? So when doing a high speed burst, there's definitely a noticeable audible sound out of this. Actually, I can show you. Listen to this clunk. That makes quite the thud. It is a little bit of sound compared to just a single shot. Phenomenally quieter, so it really thuds that shutter around. It's not the greatest camera in the world as far as that blackout period goes, but it was very, very usable and very, very functional for me, and far, far better than my previous GFX experiences. I found it fantastic. How is the IAF and how annoying is a slow refresh rate? So the IAF I found was pretty accurate. I actually did some tests for photo and video, which we'll show now. So focus speed aside, what I'm looking for here is how well it keeps up and tracks my eye, my face. I'm doing tests in two different modes. To start with, just in video. I'm looking for a few things, and do be aware this is also an assessment of how well the 50mm f3.5 lens performs in video, as different lenses, like on this different cameras, will affect autofocus performance. But in general for video, it's actually not too bad. It is a little slow, but it is accurate, and there's very minimal focus breathing to the lens. Switching over to photo mode, once again, I'm pretty impressed with how well it keeps up. The speed is a little lacking, but the accuracy is definitely there. Turning my head away from camera and disappearing from frame and then jumping back in just to see how quickly it will recognize subjects. A very good thing to be aware of is wherever you set your focus point when you haven't got a face in your shot is where your camera will look for focus when there is no face in the shot. So for example, if I have the face in the center of the frame where my head will be talking, then it will focus on my face if it ever kind of gets covered up or can't quite distinguish my face. However, if I shift it to the lamp in the background, when I leave the frame, that is where the focus will look for first and go to if you're using a single point focus system. But as far as the IAF and the face tracking goes, I found this for both photo and video very impressive. And in summary from that, for video, I was actually pretty impressed. I was really surprised at how reliable that was, and same for stills. It does a good job of keeping up with your eye, a good enough job to get the job done right as long as you trust that autofocus. Like I said, my experience with AFC isn't trustworthy for a moving subject, but say if they're swaying like this or moving around a little bit, I would be very comfortable using the IAF. The refresh rate for me, I didn't even notice. I keep forgetting to test it and keep forgetting to check it just because it felt very, very comfortable. So yes, I'm sure there are better ones, but the refresh rate and the eyepiece and the screens, etc., for me, both the times, or all the times I've used them, not an issue at all. Very, very usable to the point where, like, on slower refresh rates, I didn't notice it. On this, I didn't notice the performance issues at all. How did I find the joystick? Now this joystick is a little bit of an interesting one. So for navigating through the menu, for going up, down, left and right, it's fantastic. I really enjoyed using it. However, when you go to click it in like a button, so moving it around's all good, but clicking it like a button, very frustrating actually, because as you go to click it, every once in a while you'd bump left, down, up or right kind of thing, and you'd move your settings and then maybe click it. So for selecting items is a little bit frustrating. However, it does have this like little bit of a textured tactile grip to it, so your finger doesn't slip off and finds it very, very comfortably. So for shifting focus points around, it's phenomenal. For navigating through the menu, it's great, just when you go to hit it like a button, it is a little bit sensitive to those left and right movements. You can instead, if you like, just push the OK button, which is 2 notches down, to select something, but this is just a smidgen slower. Again, real picky here. And I'm actually pretty confident just from repetitive use, I'd get more used to that joystick sensitivity, but I think be prepared for it to accidentally bump in a direction as you go to click it in like a button. How are the dials? What's it like adapting to the new form factor and the loss of the old school dials? See, when the XS10 came out with this PASM mode dial on top, it wasn't for me. After using the traditional Fujifilm style of shooting with a shutter speed and an ISO dial and aperture on the lens, I got really comfortable at it, and I felt it was far faster way of operating than shifting to, say, manual or shutter priority and then changing some settings to suit. Once you get used to the Fujifilm system, it's very quick. And this PASM mode dial is a step back to how other brands operate, and it's a bit more away from that Fujifilm system, which is a pro for some people. It was a bit of a con for me. But if you set your dials up correctly and you get your shortcuts dialed in, unlike the XS10, for me, this was really comfortable to use for my preference of having more of that mechanical operation style. My personal favorite setup is to have the back command dial and the front command dial both set to shutter. So no matter kind of where I'm looking at my camera and kind of whatever other cameras I've been using, each one of those wheels shifts the shutter. Aperture, I still leave on the lens. That works like a treat. And then for ISO, I have set to an FN button plus either one of those dials. So I know there's either one's ISO, either one is shutter speed, and aperture is on the front. And for me, that was actually quite a quick way of changing. I'm still not the biggest fan of a PASM mode dial, but as a transition, for those that love everything else about this camera, it's nowhere near as frustrating as going to other brands, or if you've experienced the XS10 and found it wasn't for you, this is a nice halfway in between. So after a week of using the camera, what are my thoughts? What are my pros and cons? Well, I think the biggest disappointment from the camera is this is not going to be suitable for tracking high-speed sport. It's not going to be a sport, it's not going to be a wildlife AFC tracking camera that is also medium format. However, its autofocus performance is still phenomenal. It will grab your subject accurately and reliably as long as they're not moving around too much. 100 megapixels is a lot. For my landscape work, I love it. But for my wedding work, the files are too big. And while storage is cheap, it still takes up a lot of storage and is still slower to process and handle and save. And so I really wish they would add a pixel binning option for raw files. Like I said, for my wedding work, I'd love just 50 megapixels. I like having the 100 megapixel sensor, but I don't need that size file all the time. You can shoot smaller files for JPEGs, but unfortunately not for RAW. And so that 100 megapixel option with that medium format look and the latitude you can pull out of the files, there are some pros and cons to dealing with that. And I'd hope that pixel binned RAW files is an option they could add with RAW with a firmware update in the future. I did get a few questions asking what working with the RAW files is like from a 100 megapixel camera, and to be honest, I think there must be a little bit of information out there now from the GFX 100. From my personal experience, you can use the RAW files at the time of this recording using Fujifilm RAW Studio, and there's a couple of other workarounds, but my preferred software for editing RAW files, Lightroom and Capture One, do not currently support this camera yet at the time of recording this video, so I couldn't give an accurate result on that. However, I do have a very entertaining video coming up once that support comes out, so do stay tuned for that in the future. But to be honest, in the end, its size and weight and image quality and ergonomics is fantastic. I love the grip. There's this little bit of a notch out of the bottom here, which is very comfortable to hold. And holding it up like that, and I'm 6 foot tall, what I'd consider average size hands, my fingers aren't crunching against the body there. The screen on the top is huge and fantastic, and it's actually very customizable through the menu. It is still a little bit thicker than other cameras, but for a medium format, this camera is phenomenally light, especially considering it's got the stabilization, the eyepiece, it does reasonably quality video. It's got a lot of ports, it's got a nice flippy screen. There's a lot to love about this camera as far as ergonomics go. That PASM mode dial won't be for everybody, but like I said, you can really customize it to suit you, to really bridge that gap, to still get phenomenal quality and a phenomenally ergonomic to use body for medium format, for a reasonable medium format price. If you have any other questions about this camera, I do have it on me for literally just a few more days. Please let me know down in the comments below, and I'll either answer them for you or try my best to remember the answers for you and let you know. If you could please like, share and subscribe, it would mean the world to me. But otherwise guys, until next time, I'll catch you next time.